The midday sun dappled through the lush canopy of oak trees, casting shifting patterns of light and shadow across the meticulously manicured lawns of Central Park. Laughter from a distant playground mixed with the low hum of city traffic, a constant, almost comforting symphony in the background. Amidst this vibrant tableau, a figure sat motionless on a weathered wooden bench, an island of stillness in a sea of motion. This was Mark, a man whose quiet demeanor belied a lifetime of intense experiences. His eyes, the color of a stormy sea, scanned the surroundings with an almost preternatural awareness, missing nothing. He appeared to be simply enjoying the tranquility, perhaps lost in thought, but every fiber of his being was attuned to the subtle rhythms of the park. Mark was a veteran, a former Marine, though you'd never guess it from his unassuming attire. A faded denim jacket, a pair of worn jeans, and sneakers that had seen better days. He lived a modest, almost reclusive life in a small, cramped apartment in the heart of this bustling American city, a stark contrast to the life he once knew. His quietude was not merely a preference, it was a shield, a coping mechanism forged in the crucible of combat, a silent testament to the invisible wounds he carried, the persistent echoes of PTSD that often left him adrift in a sea of memories. Suddenly, his gaze sharpened, fixing on a particular sight. A police K9 unit, a German shepherd trotting dutifully beside its officer handler, was making its rounds. The dog, a magnificent creature with intelligent, watchful eyes, moved with an effortless grace that spoke of rigorous training and an innate bond with its human partner. As they passed within Mark's periphery, something shifted. The dog, without breaking stride, subtly turned its head, its eyes momentarily locking with Mark's. It was a fleeting glance, barely perceptible to the casual observer, but Mark recognized it. It was a signal, a silent acknowledgement, almost like a question. A jolt ran through Mark. He'd worked with K9s during his service, forging bonds deeper than words with those incredibly perceptive animals. He knew their language, their tells. This dog's subtle reaction was unusual, a flicker of something beyond routine patrol. Then, his attention snapped to the handler, a young officer, male, with a stern, professional expression. Mark's observation deepened, his veteran's instinct kicking in, honed by years of reading danger in the smallest details. He noticed a slight tremor in the officer's left hand as he adjusted the K9's leash, a fleeting tension around his jaw that wasn't just exertion. More importantly, he detected a deep-seated unease in the officer's posture, a guardedness that seemed out of place for a routine patrol in a public park. The officer's eyes, though attempting to convey authority, held a faint, almost imperceptible shadow, a flicker of apprehension that Mark, an expert in reading subtle cues of distress from his own military background, immediately recognized. It was a sign of being under duress, a man attempting to maintain composure while battling an internal storm. This single, almost invisible detail sparked a long-dormant instinct within Mark. His initial desire was to remain unnoticed, to continue his quiet observation of the world from the periphery, a ghost in the machine of the metropolis. His PTSD often made social interaction a minefield, each encounter a potential trigger. Yet, the subtle distress he perceived in the officer, coupled with the K9's strange acknowledgement, gnawed at him. He felt a pull, a compelling urge to act, to intervene, to understand. The shadows in that officer's eyes mirrored shadows Mark knew all too well from his past, shadows of fear and unspoken burdens. He understood the silent plea, the desperate attempt to maintain control when the world felt like it was crumbling. The conflict raged within him. the ingrained instinct to protect, battling against the deep-seated desire for peace and anonymity. His quiet life, so meticulously constructed, now felt threatened by this unexpected flicker of trouble. Before we dive deeper into Mark's incredible story, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss out on more true tales of courage and intuition. Mark's gaze intensified, the casual observer facade slowly dissolving into a focused, almost clinical scrutiny as he watched the K-9 unit. The subtle signals he'd initially perceived between Coda and Officer Miller now seemed to multiply, weaving a clearer, more unsettling narrative. Coda, the magnificent German shepherd, usually a picture of confident alertness, carried an unusual subduedness in its posture. Its head was slightly lowered, not in fatigue, but in a persistent, almost empathic worry. Every few seconds, the dog's intelligent eyes would flick towards Officer Miller, a quick, almost imperceptible glance, heavy with an unspoken concern that gnawed at Mark. It wasn't the trained vigilance of a police dog on duty, but something far more personal, far more profound. Mark, with his own history with military working dogs, recognized the signs of a deep, symbiotic bond under duress. Coda was trying to communicate distress, reflecting its handler's hidden turmoil. Officer Miller maintained a professional bearing, walking with a steady pace, engaging passerby with polite nods when necessary. Yet, beneath the veneer, micro-expressions of fear and anxiety flickered across the officer's face, betraying an inner struggle. Mark noticed the subtle tightening around the eyes when the officer thought no one was looking, the slight tremor in the hand that held the leash when Coda subtly tugged. These were the telltale signs of a person under immense pressure, trying desperately to maintain composure. The true antagonist, or at least the immediate obstacle, soon made his presence felt. A civilian, well-dressed in a tailored suit that seemed slightly out of place for a weekday park stroll, approached Officer Miller. He was a man in his late 40s, with a slick, almost too perfect hairstyle and a smile that didn't quite reach his calculating eyes. This individual radiated an unsettling aura of false joviality. He attempted to engage Officer Miller in conversation, an act that, to an untrained eye, might have appeared innocuous. But Mark saw the immediate stiffening in Officer Miller's shoulders, the way the officer's hand instinctively tightened on Coda's leash, almost imperceptibly pulling the dog closer. It was a defensive posture, a reaction to perceived threat, not an innocent encounter. The polite smiles Officer Miller offered in return were strained, brittle, barely masking a profound discomfort. Coda, sensing the shift, let out a low, almost inaudible growl, its body tensing, its eyes now fixed on the well-dressed civilian with an unblinking intensity. The dog knew. Mark knew he had to get closer. The situation was escalating beyond a mere hunch. He needed more information, concrete details, before any intervention could be considered. He deliberately slowed his pace, feigning absorption in his smartphone, scrolling through an empty newsfeed, his screen casting a faint glow on his thoughtful face. This allowed him to maintain a veneer of nonchalance, blending into the ebb and flow of park-goers. Yet, every fiber of his being, every honed instinct, was acutely aware of the K-9 unit. His ears strained, catching snippets of conversation carried on the gentle breeze, his peripheral vision locked onto the evolving tableau. He moved with a practiced, almost invisible grace learned from years of tactical observation, positioning himself to gain maximum insight without drawing attention. He wanted to understand the full scope of the predicament, to identify the precise nature of the threat before taking any action that might inadvertently deepen Officer Miller's troubles or jeopardize Coda's safety. The air around the K9 unit crackled with an unspoken tension, a silent drama unfolding beneath the guise of a routine patrol, and Mark was now an unwilling yet determined audience. The civilian, a man whose expensive suit did little to hide the menace in his eyes, leaned in closer to Officer Miller, his voice a low, gravelly rumble that barely carried over the park's ambient sounds. Mark, now strategically positioned near a large oak tree, straining to decipher the hushed exchange, realized his initial assessment was terrifyingly accurate. This wasn't a casual chat. It was an intimidation tactic. "You understand what's at stake, officer," the man purred. "A simple misunderstanding, a lapse in judgment, and your family. Well, they might find themselves in a rather unfortunate situation." The words, though vague, hung heavy with unspoken threats, painting a chilling picture of vulnerability. Officer Miller's jaw tightened, a muscle twitching almost imperceptibly, but the officer's eyes darted around, betraying a deep-seated fear. Mark's blood ran cold. This wasn't just about a shifty character harassing a cop. This was blackmail, pure and simple. The man was a known figure in the city's criminal underworld, a ghost whispered about in hushed tones, notoriously difficult to pin down. Mark recognized the type, a predator who operated in the shadows, using veiled threats and implied violence to maintain control. He felt a surge of indignation, a familiar heat rising in his chest that hadn't burned so fiercely since his days in active duty. This crime boss, with his slick demeanor and ruthless agenda, was targeting an honorable officer, exploiting their deepest fears. Suddenly, Coda, who had been sitting patiently by Officer Miller's side, began to stir. The magnificent German shepherd let out a low growl, barely audible, its ears swiveling towards the civilian. The dog's intelligent eyes, usually calm and focused, now held a glint of something akin to alarm. Coda shifted its weight, pulling lightly on the leash, a silent plea, a canine warning. A soft bark escaped its throat, directed not at Officer Miller, but at the menacing figure who continued to loom over its handler. The dog was sensing the palpable tension, the silent threat, and its protective instincts were kicking in. It was trying to tell Officer Miller something, trying to warn them of the danger lurking beneath the surface of the polite conversation. Watching Coda's agitation, Mark felt his own determination solidify. The subtle cues from the dog, the officer's forced composure, the criminal's insidious threats, it all clicked into place. This wasn't just an observation anymore. It was an active threat unfolding before his eyes. His own PTSD, a constant companion, began to prickle, not with fear, but with a sharpened focus. He remembered similar scenarios from his combat days, the quiet moments before an ambush, the seemingly innocuous interactions that masked deadly intent. He recalled the helplessness of watching comrades face unseen dangers, the burning desire to intervene, to protect. This wasn't a war zone, but the stakes for Officer Miller felt just as high, just as personal. The raw injustice of it all, the blatant abuse of power, ignited a fire within Mark that had long lain dormant. He couldn't stand by and watch this officer be bullied, their family threatened, their integrity compromised. He had to act. He knew he possessed a unique perspective, a veteran's insight into high-pressure situations, an understanding of subtle communication, both human and canine. This wasn't a situation for brute force. It required finesse, a strategic intervention that would expose the threat without escalating the immediate danger. He needed to be clever, to use his own skills and Coda's instincts to turn the tide. The gears in his mind began to spin, formulating a plan, however nascent, to disrupt this sinister charade. He would intervene, but on his own terms, making sure that both Officer Miller and Coda were safe from the fallout. He understood the delicacy of the situation, recognizing that a wrongly timed or overtly aggressive move could backfire catastrophically, putting Officer Miller in an even more precarious position. The quiet veteran, haunted by his past, was about to become an unexpected guardian. The quiet veteran, haunted by his past, was about to become an unexpected guardian. As Mark observed the unfolding drama, Coda suddenly made an almost imperceptible signal, a quick flick of its right ear followed by a direct, unwavering stare into Mark's eyes. It was a movement so subtle that only another K9 handler, or someone intimately familiar with highly trained police dogs, would ever notice it. This wasn't just a dog being agitated. This was Coda communicating, alerting to an immediate, unrecognized threat. The veteran immediately understood. Coda, with its uncanny canine instinct, had recognized something in Mark. Perhaps his military posture, the quiet intensity in his gaze, or simply the scent of a fellow warrior, and instinctively reached out for aid, acknowledging Mark as a potential ally in a moment of escalating danger. A wave of understanding washed over Mark. Coda wasn't just barking because it sensed distress. It was signaling him. This was a communication, a plea for help from one trained professional to another, even if one was human and the other canine. The unspoken acknowledgement passed between them like an electric current. Mark felt a profound sense of responsibility mixed with a surge of adrenaline. The situation was more critical than he had initially assessed. The crime boss was not just a bully. He was an immediate, active threat that Coda was attempting to flag. The dog's intelligent eyes held a desperate intelligence, a silent plea that echoed in Mark's own battle-hardened soul. He knew this signal from his own K9 handler days, a specific alert for an unrecognized, imminent danger that the handler somehow wasn't processing. Coda was telling him, unequivocally, that this civilian was trouble, and Officer Miller was not seeing the full picture. Mark's mind raced, quickly formulating a plan. Direct confrontation was out of the question. It would put Officer Miller in an even more vulnerable position and likely escalate the crime boss's aggression. He needed to draw attention to the situation without directly implicating Officer Miller or appearing to intervene on their behalf. His knowledge of police procedures, specifically how K9 units operated and reacted to diversions, became paramount. He needed to create a disturbance, a credible distraction that would force the crime boss to retreat and, crucially, bring the attention of other officers without revealing the blackmail plot prematurely. The goal was to create enough of a stir for the crime boss to feel exposed and withdraw, giving Officer Miller a much-needed reprieve and an opportunity to safely disengage. The challenge was executing this plan with surgical precision, making it appear entirely accidental. Mark knew the police protocols, understood how K9s were trained to respond to certain stimuli, and he could leverage that. He needed to trigger Coda into a controlled public reaction that would serve his purpose. It wasn't about attacking the crime boss, but about making him visible, making his illicit conversation with Officer Miller impossible to continue in secret. He considered various scenarios, weighing the risks and benefits of each. A loud noise? A fake medical emergency? All these had potential downsides. He settled on a strategy that involved Coda more directly, using the dog's training against the crime boss's hidden agenda. With his plan solidifying, Mark's gaze met Coda's again. This time, he offered a slight, almost imperceptible nod, a gesture of acknowledgement that spoke volumes to the intelligent canine. It was a silent promise, a signal that he had heard Coda's warning and understood the gravity of the situation. Coda's ears twitched almost imperceptibly in response, a confirmation that the message had been received and understood. The bond between them, forged in a shared understanding of duty and danger, was instantaneous and unspoken. Mark took a deep breath, the phantom smells of dusty combat zones momentarily replaced by the mundane aroma of city park hot dogs. He began to move, subtly altering his trajectory, positioning himself to be in Koda's direct line of sight. The next few moments would determine everything. The quiet veteran was no longer just observing. He was actively preparing to engage, to protect. He was stepping back into the fray, not with a weapon, but with his wits and an old, almost forgotten K9 signal. Mark's eyes darted around, assessing the scene. The crime boss was still leaning in, his voice a low, insidious murmur, his back mostly to Mark. Officer Miller stood rigid, a picture of professional calm belied by the faint tremor in their hands. Koda remained agitated, a low whine now escaping its throat, its gaze fixed on the menacing civilian. This was his window, a fleeting moment of opportunity. With a practiced casualness that belied the racing pulse in his chest, Mark sauntered past a small display stand showcasing local artisan crafts. His hand, seemingly by accident, brushed against a stack of ceramic mugs, sending them clattering loudly to the ground. The sudden crash resonated through the otherwise subdued park atmosphere, a sharp, attention-grabbing sound. The crime boss, startled by the noise, finally broke off his intense conversation with Officer Miller, glancing over his shoulder with a frown of annoyance. This split second of distraction was all Mark needed. Feigning extreme clumsiness, Mark stumbled forward, exaggerating a loss of balance, as if tripped by an invisible obstacle. He lurched directly towards Officer Miller, his path perfectly calculated to bring him within Koda's immediate vicinity. As he tripped, his eyes met Koda's, a quick, intense connection. In that fleeting instant, almost imperceptible to anyone else, Mark executed a precise, prearranged K9 command gesture he had drilled countless times during his military service. It was a subtle hand signal, a specific flick of the wrist, combined with a particular head tilt and a barely audible click of his tongue, a sequence designed to trigger an immediate, aggressive response in a highly trained working dog, indicating a direct threat to its handler. Koda, a master of interpreting subtle cues, processed the command with lightning speed. The dog's instincts, already primed by the palpable tension emanating from Officer Miller and the perceived threat from the crime boss, instantly locked onto Mark's signal. With an explosive burst of energy, Koda reacted precisely as trained. A thunderous bark ripped through the air, sharp and authoritative, a sound that instantly commanded attention. The dog lunged forward, straining violently against its leash, its powerful body pulling forcefully in the direction of the crime boss. Koda's barks were no longer soft whines. They were a furious, relentless assault of sound, making it appear as if the dog had suddenly, inexplicably, decided that the well-dressed civilian was an immediate, dangerous threat. The outburst was dramatic and utterly unexpected. Koda's sudden, aggressive display sent a chain reaction through the immediate vicinity. Other park-goers, who had been enjoying the tranquil afternoon, turned their heads sharply, their conversations abruptly ceasing. Their eyes, wide with concern and curiosity, converged on the scene. A police K9 barking furiously and lunging at a civilian, its handler struggling to maintain control. The crime boss, caught completely off guard by Koda's sudden, unprovoked attack, recoiled visibly. His meticulously composed facade crumbled, replaced by an expression of shock and irritation. He instinctively took a step back, then another, trying to distance himself from the snarling K9. The unexpected public spectacle meant he could no longer maintain his discreet, menacing posture towards Officer Miller. His carefully constructed intimidation was shattered by the raw, untamed power of the police dog. Other police officers on patrol, alerted by the sudden commotion and the distinctive sound of a canine in full cry, began to converge on the location, their expressions shifting from routine vigilance to active concern. The attention was now on them, exactly as Mark had intended. The pressure on Officer Miller was momentarily lifted, but a new, more public scrutiny had replaced it. The sudden piercing bark from Coda reverberated through the otherwise serene park, a jarring disruption that instantly drew every eye. Officer Miller, caught completely off guard by the dog's forceful lunge, stumbled backward, the leash yanked taut in her hand. For a split second, a flicker of raw surprise crossed her face, quickly followed by a flash of understanding. She saw Mark standing just a few feet away, his expression a carefully crafted mask of concern and mild embarrassment. Their eyes met for a fleeting instant, a silent exchange that communicated volumes without a single word being uttered. Miller, a seasoned officer, was momentarily disoriented, her internal monologue a whirlwind of confusion and dawning realization. Her K9, always so disciplined, had just appeared to attack a civilian without provocation. Her training screamed protocol violation, yet a deeper instinct, honed by years of working with Coda, told her this was no random outburst. She recognized the unique intensity in Coda's eyes, the unusual ferocity in its bark, a stark contrast to its typical controlled aggression. The crime boss, who had been leaning in conspiratorially, his voice low and menacing, recoiled sharply. His carefully composed facade cracked, revealing a flash of genuine anger and frustration. The sudden, unexpected spotlight on him was precisely what he abhorred. Public confrontations were messy. They left traces, drew unwanted attention, and jeopardized his carefully constructed anonymity. He shot a venomous glare at Coda, then at Officer Miller, a silent promise of future retribution hanging heavy in the air. His eyes, cold and reptilian, lingered on Miller for a moment longer, a chilling message of unfinished business, before he spun on his heel and melted into the throng of curious onlookers. He didn't want to explain his presence, or defend against the implied accusation of being the target of a police dog's sudden ire. The last thing he needed was to be questioned by other officers about why a K9 unit was suddenly so agitated in his presence. The subtle power he wielded depended on operating unseen, unheard, and unchallenged. Almost immediately, the distinct wail of approaching sirens, faintly heard a moment ago, grew louder, drawing closer to their location in the park. 2 patrol cars, responding to calls about a disturbance, pulled up to the curb. Doors opened, and uniformed officers, their expressions a mix of curiosity and readiness, quickly converged on Officer Miller and Coda. "Everything all right here, Miller?" one of them asked, his gaze sweeping from the agitated K9 to the clearly shaken Officer Miller. The park had gone from a tranquil oasis to a scene of intense scrutiny. Miller, still grappling with the sudden turn of events, struggled to compose herself. Her mind raced, trying to reconcile the conflicting demands of her duty, the threat to her family, and the unexpected intervention that had just unfolded. Just as Officer Miller began to formulate a response, Mark, with a calm and measured pace, inserted himself into the scene. He approached the group, his posture radiating a practiced, non-threatening concern. "Officer, I think that man was bothering her," Mark stated, his voice clear and steady, gesturing vaguely in the direction the crime boss had disappeared. His words were carefully chosen, designed to redirect suspicion and protect Officer Miller. He was acting very suspicious, getting right in her face. Even the dog sensed it. He continued, making direct eye contact with the inquiring officer. "Coda here. She just started barking out of nowhere. Seemed like she was protecting the officer. Good dog," he added, reaching out a hand cautiously towards Coda, who, surprisingly, gave a soft whine and leaned into his touch for a second, a silent acknowledgement of their shared understanding before pulling back to its handler. Mark's intervention was masterful. He wove a narrative that was plausible, drawing on the commonly understood protective nature of police dogs and cleverly deflecting any potential blame from Officer Miller's handling of the situation. He framed Coda's outburst not as an anomaly, but as a justified response to a perceived threat from an unidentified, suspicious individual. His explanation provided the approaching officers with a clear, simple reason for the commotion, allowing Officer Miller to regain her composure and avoid having to directly explain the complex and dangerous blackmail situation she was facing. He knew precisely how to leverage the circumstances, turning momentary chaos into a strategic advantage, all while subtly pointing the investigation in the right direction without overtly revealing his own intimate knowledge of the situation. The officers, accepting Mark's concerned citizen explanation, immediately shifted their focus to finding the suspicious man, unaware of the intricate dance of danger and rescue that had just transpired. The responding officers, now fully briefed on the suspicious individual who had agitated the K-9 unit, initiated a thorough search of the park and its immediate surroundings. Mark, feigning casual observation, lingered nearby, making sure to provide a discreet yet comprehensive description of the crime boss to one of the patrol officers. He detailed the man's expensive suit, his distinctive silver watch, and a subtle scar he'd noticed above his left eyebrow. Mark's memory for such details, honed by years of reconnaissance and observation in combat zones, was incredibly precise. He made sure the description was specific enough to be useful without appearing overly keen or suspiciously well-informed. The officers, grateful for the eyewitness account, quickly disseminated the information through their radios, transforming a vague report of agitation into an active pursuit of a person of interest. Mark watched as the squad cars peeled off, sirens wailing, their departure leaving a noticeable vacuum in the park's previously tense atmosphere. He felt a quiet satisfaction, knowing he had successfully steered the official response in the right direction, setting the wheels of justice in motion without directly exposing Officer Miller or himself to immediate danger. As the last patrol car disappeared from view, Officer Miller, who had been quietly taking in the scene, and Mark's understated but effective intervention, finally approached him. Her face, etched with a mixture of relief and lingering fear, was streaked with unshed tears. Coda, sensing the shift in her handler's emotional state, nudged her hand gently. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice cracking with emotion. "I don't know how you knew, or why you did it, but you saved me. You saved my family." The raw confession tumbled out of her, the weight of the blackmail situation she had been carrying alone finally too heavy to bear. She explained, in halting sentences, how the crime boss, a notoriously ruthless figure in the city's underworld, had targeted her family, promising unimaginable harm if she didn't use her position to compromise an ongoing investigation. He had threatened her children by name, described their daily routines, even mentioned their favorite toys. The terror had been constant, suffocating, forcing her into a silent, desperate battle she felt she was losing. Her voice trembled as she recounted the agonizing choice she faced: betray her sworn duty or risk everything she held dear. Mark listened patiently, his gaze unwavering, a silent testament to his understanding. He saw in her eyes a reflection of his own past struggles, the impossible dilemmas, the the fear of losing what mattered most. He reached out, not to touch her, but to gently rub Coda's head, an act that seemed to calm both the dog and, subtly, its handler. "You don't have to explain, officer," Mark said, his voice soft but firm. "I saw enough. And Coda told me the rest." He paused, letting the gravity of his words settle. "You did the right thing. You didn't give in. That takes more courage than most people will ever know." He reassured her that she was not alone, that what she went through was a testament to her strength, not her weakness. He spoke of the insidious nature of such threats, how they preyed on the strongest bonds, but also how those bonds could become the source of unexpected resilience. "Sometimes," he continued, "the hardest battles are fought in silence, but you won't fight this one alone anymore. Coda's loyalty saved you, and now we ensure that loyalty is truly rewarded, that justice is served." His words, imbued with a deep, empathetic understanding, offered not just comfort, but a renewed sense of purpose, and the unwavering support she desperately needed. The police investigation, propelled by Mark's vague but compelling description and the undeniable fact of Coda's agitation, quickly gained traction. While Officer Miller initially hesitated to fully disclose the depth of the blackmail, the presence of an active investigation, coupled with Mark's earlier intervention, provided the necessary shield. She found the courage to confide in a superior officer, recounting the terrifying threats and the crime boss's insidious grip. The detailed information about the crime boss, including his usual haunts and associates, which Officer Miller reluctantly provided, aligned perfectly with existing intelligence on a known local syndicate leader. Within a remarkably short time, the man was apprehended. The meticulously planned blackmail plot unraveled, and Officer Miller's family, previously held hostage by fear, was finally safe. The relief that washed over her was palpable, a heavy burden lifted by the collective action of a veteran's quick thinking and her own newfound resilience. Mark, witnessing the swift resolution from a quiet distance, felt a profound sense of peace settle over him. For years, the echoes of past conflicts had defined his existence, casting long shadows of doubt and regret. Yet, in this simple act of helping another, of recognizing a silent plea for aid and responding with strategic courage, he found a purpose that transcended his own struggles. The weight of his PTSD did not vanish entirely, but its grip loosened. He began to see his past not as an endless well of trauma, but as a repository of hard-won knowledge, skills that could still be used for good. He formed an unexpected silent bond with Officer Miller and Coda, a connection born of shared danger and mutual respect. He understood now that even in his quiet, unassuming life, he possessed the capacity for immense courage, the ability to protect those who needed it most. This incident, more than any therapy session or self-help book, helped Mark confront his own inner demons, transforming his combat reflexes into acts of civic bravery. He realized his strength wasn't just in his ability to endure, but in his unwavering capacity to care. Later, Officer Miller sought him out in the park, Coda trotting faithfully beside her. There were no grand declarations, no effusive thanks, just a shared glance of understanding. A quiet nod from Officer Miller, a gentle nuzzle from Coda against Mark's leg, and a soft, almost imperceptible smile from the veteran spoke volumes. He saw in her eyes not just gratitude, but a recognition of his true self, a man who, despite his silent battles, remained a protector. He saw in Coda's calm gaze a confirmation of their unique, wordless communication. The park, once a neutral backdrop to his solitary existence, now held the memory of an extraordinary event, weaving a new thread into the fabric of his life. Mark's story is a powerful reminder that courage comes in many forms, and a helping hand can make all the difference. It shows us that true strength often lies not in overt displays of heroism, but in the quiet, decisive actions of individuals willing to act when others cannot or will not. If you were moved by this incredible tale, give this video a thumbs up, share it with a friend, and leave a comment below telling us what you found most inspiring. Perhaps it was Mark's intuition, Coda's loyalty, or Officer Miller's resilience in the face of immense pressure. And for more heroic true stories, tales of unexpected bravery and unwavering spirit, click on our next video right here.